Thank you for listening to another edition of the Business of Fun podcast. It's me, your host, Dave Wakeman. My guest today is Faisal Hoque. Faisal has a new book out called Transcend, Unlocking Humanity in the Age of AI. And I thought it would be great to have Faisal come on because everybody's asking about AI. But we'll get to my conversation with Faisal in just a moment. Before I do, though, I want to remind you of a couple things. Number one, visit my website, davewakeman.com. I've been trying a new distribution technique, so everything goes on the website and I distribute it out into the world. Cory Doctorow, who came up with the term enshittification, has a name for this, and I have been testing it out just to see what happens, right? So technical stuff that doesn't matter to you. It's just that stuff is going up on the website, and if you don't want to miss it, make sure you visit the website, right? You can still sign up in the little Dropbox, get the newsletter. It's great because things like the 5-part webinar series about selling tickets in times of uncertainty, the first time you heard of it would be there. I think this episode is going to go out on April 1st, so you probably may still have time to sign up for the first session on understanding premium and single ticket buyer mindset in times of economic uncertainty. But all in the series will be there on the website. The signups will go live there first. Make sure you get that by signing up and hitting that Dropbox so you never miss a thing. Also, I know this will go out before April 3rd, which is a Thursday. And on Thursday, I'm going to be in New York City giving a guest lecture at NYU to one of their sports management classes about integrated marketing communication. So things like brand and how that plays into everything. It's going to be great. I think I released a little in the Talking Tickets newsletter, a preview. So it's going to be awesome. But I don't know exactly what I'll do, but I'll try to find some time to get together with everybody in New York City. So if you are interested, send me an email. My name, Dave, at davewakeman.com. Put NYC in the subject line, and we will see about how we can get together. So anyway, back to my conversation with Faisal Hoque. We talked about AI, right? The most important thing is, will AI steal my job? Right. So we talked about how to use AI. We talked about frameworks to think about in using AI. We talked about the power of humanity. We talked about whether or not AI is just a tool or if it's like something more dangerous. We talked about context and humans. We talked about patterns and pattern interruption. We talked about empathy and mindfulness. We talked about innovation and enterprise. We covered catastrophes and worst case scenarios and planning to use AI. We talked about all kinds of stuff around artificial intelligence. His book is great. I enjoyed it. He teaches about critical thinking, gives us some frameworks for using AI as a tool. This was really helpful, and I wanted to have this conversation with Faisal because I know so many of the promises of AI are so great, and sometimes we can feel like we're being left behind if we don't use everything right away the same way it seems like, and I'm using air quotes here, everyone else is doing it. So without anything else from me, here's my conversation with Faisal Hoque on the Business of Fun. All right, I would like to welcome Faisal Hoque to the Business of Fun podcast. Faisal, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Dave.
Oh, this is great. I have been looking forward to this conversation because you have a new book coming out called Transcend, and it is about artificial intelligence. And that is something that people ask me about a lot. So I have a number of questions. I think I actually prepared pretty well for this. This is great. I'm going to start out with the most important question is, should I be afraid of artificial intelligence and AI?
Yes and no. So
because it's going to steal my job, right?
You are. Not necessarily, but you're not going to be doing the same thing. That's for sure.
Well, I think that's like really the lesson you learn from any technology is that like there's a certain amount of over-promising or underestimating any new technology, and that the context is always the most important thing. And that's sort of what I really dug about the book when I had a chance to go through it, is because
it's not just a one-sided thing like, oh, AI is going to save the world or AI is going to destroy the world.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
the whole entire book is about the context.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, what led you to take this approach to writing about AI?
Look, I mean, as you just said that, I mean, we have seen a lot of different kind of revolution slash evolution in our human history, and every technological evolution or revolution creates opportunity, but it also changes a lot of things. Particularly with AI, what is interesting is that we have never had any kind of technology that has the potential to be a higher level of intelligence than human being, and that's where it gets interesting, because it's a collection of our entire human society versus one particular thing. Uh, so there's a philosophical change, technological change, business change, and obviously societal change that's going to get impacted by AI.
Yeah, one of the things I talk about with people is I go out of anytime there's volatility, there's opportunity, right? And
Yes.
I mean, I saw you were on the Thinkers 50 strategy list, so I mean, I figured that would be a good way for me to work my way into your good graces by coming up with some really catchy phrase, because um, but when you talk about this potential of higher thinking, I think that's where people get afraid of the
Yes.
idea of the technology. And this is
Mhm.
one place where I think it is oversold and overpromised, is like, because people have this image that the robots are gonna like just take over everything and they won't need us anymore. And your book is actually like more looks at the partnership, right? And it's the
Yes.
way that
Yeah.
it goes beyond being a tool, and it's a partner.
Yeah.
And I think that was a
Yeah.
really good way of looking at things. Can you explain what you mean by this so that people have a better
Absolutely.
understanding?
Yeah. Look, I mean, the reality is that we have been using artificial intelligence one form or another for last 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Various element of that. So, for example, automation, for example, decision making, predictive modeling. These are all part of algorithmic change that has happened.
Mhm.
Last 2, 3 years, why we have so much focus on it is because of the natural language evolution and
Yeah.
this whole generative AI movement. And then we're now seeing, the emergence of agentic AI. We're going to start seeing AGI, which is, the general artificial intelligence. All of this is just pushing the boundaries to the next level and next level. So, for example, here's a simple example. We do it every day now, but we don't pay attention to it. When you drive your car, you're letting, GPS guiding you, right?
Yeah.
You're buying a pair of shoe. Amazon is suggesting you should be buying this pair of shoe because you bought similar things. You're watching something, Netflix is telling you this is the next thing you should be looking at. So those are kind of all the things that got baked into us, and we've been programmed and deprogrammed as a society to get used to it. What's happening now? Like, for example, I made a, I posted something this morning on LinkedIn, and this is based on an article that I wrote a couple of weeks back, and I went to my generative AI driven presentation creator, and I said, translate this article into a presentation, and within 2 seconds, I have a presentation. Right? Is it perfect? No, but so that is that versus if I went to my graphic designer and said, look, here's the article, create like 5 slides, or I would sit down and I will summarize the slides and come up with the slides. So that's a simple example of work productivity thing, right?
Mhm.
Let's take it a little more, human interaction. I'm having a conversation as a researcher saying, hey, I have this theory. What do you think? And can you give me some real, related research by other thinkers that are out there? And I'm having a I'm actually having a real conversation, right? So So these type of things is going to start making AI as your partner and as your collaborator in all sorts of things, personal and professional. You could you could post something on, let's say, go to ChatGPT and say, and type of things. And I'm excited today because my book is about to be launched in 4 weeks. And it will start a conversation with you, which is very human-like, right? So this is where it gets blurry, and as we emerge to this notion of general artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence, AGI, it's going to be more and more human-like. And what's interesting is that you or I have, we have certain amount of knowledge, and we can only compute at certain speed, and we know where to go. Now imagine thousands of us or millions of us in a interconnected way responding to you and I. Obviously, it has a higher degree of computing power and higher degree of cognition level that you and I don't have, right? So that's where it gets interesting.
Well, the way I use AI a lot is I have I flip back and forth between ChatGPT and Claude, and
Yeah, sure.
but I use it really as like a in a way as a coach for myself, and then as
Sure.
and really it's almost like an assistant for me, but not in a way like
Sure.
people think about an assistant just taking in like mindless tasks. It's like an assistant that helps me catalog and better use the knowledge I have, right? So it's
Sure.
like was doing tons of workshops, and I was like seeing patterns and everything, and right, and so I said, look, I'm going to put my notes in here, and I want you to help me create a framework for how these things
Yeah.
go. And then all of a sudden I have this really great framework that people think I'm a genius for, and it is. I am
Right.
truly a genius. I don't want to but it was like I did the work, and then but I had a partner, and so I don't have that same fear. And one of the cool things I thought about that you talk about in the book was how one of the important things that humans bring to AI, which should lessen their fear, is the ability to break patterns. Can you
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, look, I mean, AI so far is as good as you are, in the sense that you're the one. AI reads from a preset set of data. And by the way, when we're talking about AI, before I get into it, we should categorize the usage and the type of AI, in the sense of there's consumer usage, there's enterprise usage, there's government usage, and it's not the same. The way you are using AI for your as a personal research assistant or a collaborator as an individual is very different than, let's say, an organization using it for workflow management, right? Or to assign tasks, or government is using going through a huge amount of data to process citizen requests, right? So there are various usage of that. So from that perspective, we have to kind of figure out what is the purpose that we are trying to accomplish, and then look at AI as a enabler for that, right? Where it gets dicey is that there will be a time whereby human beings are very much comfort driven. We are to a certain extent lazy. We want convenience. So some of us are gradually outsourcing our critical thinking process to AI or AI-driven engines, where I don't want to drive around my neighborhood. I want to tell my AI assistant exactly which restaurant I should be eating based on rating and based on my eating habits and based on my budget, right? So rather than, like old days, you used to walk around the neighborhood and it's okay, is there a new restaurant? And let me try this, right? So this is where, it almost become clinical relationship versus a human relationship. That's what we have to guard against.
Yeah. And you talked about how we're outsourcing our critical thinking skills. And I think that's probably where like people can get into trouble. Because I think even before we had AI, we were not necessarily always using our critical thinking skills as much as we should have as a
Sure.
society. You, what critical thinking skills and do you think people should be looking at and like using like to because I think having those critical thinking skills, it helps maximize your ability to use AI effectively. I mean, duh. But I mean, what should people be working on or thinking about?
Look, it goes at a very fundamental level of how do you define humanity? What is human? Or what does it mean to be human? So in my, and there's a lot of philosophical thinking, both from Eastern philosophical tenet and Western philosophical tenet, which we used in the book. But you can boil it down to two things. One is freedom. It's humanity wants freedom to pursue their own path and creative, interest, however you want to define happiness, etc., etc. The other thing is the notion of love. It's a love of your family, love of your country, love of your art, craft, whatever the case may be. Those are the two elements that defines what it means to be human. So if you now using something else to influence that and to shape that, and you're not pursuing what's within a individualized soul, then you're starting to outsource your creative thinking. So, for example, I can ask ChatGPT to say, hey, I want to be nice to my wife, so write me a poetry, and I want you to use these words, and it writes it, right? So that's one way of looking at it versus that, you know what? No, I'm going to really express my feeling, and I'm going to write this. Maybe I will use ChatGPT to make it better, but it's my original thoughts, not my whatever, right? So it depends how you want to look at all these things. But I think when it comes to like practicing empathy, practicing mindfulness, practicing what you care about, practicing to fulfill your destiny in terms of what is figuring out what is it that you are excited about and what awakes you and how you add value. Those are the elements that drives critical thinking process. We're all kind of I'm guilty of this as much as anybody else. For example, I can't or I won't read a map anymore because there is GPS. No, that's it is, so we have been using algorithmic assisted things for a while, right? But the people who can read map, I think, are much better in terms of providing direction than somebody who always have to look up a GPS like me, who constantly getting lost even with GPS, right? So it depends what is important to you in terms of your critical thinking pattern. But I don't think as a humanity we should be losing. I think the minute we start losing these basic things about humanity in terms of empathy, love, freedom, we lost it.
Yes. And I think that's, to me, that's where people have to fight is, and that's is worth fighting for, right? Because it is, I feel like society tries to train us to systemize everything, right? Like even those critical thinking skills, those aspects of our humanity. And I feel like this is where the real danger of AI comes in, is like, it becomes like another crutch, and like slowly it encroaches on everything. And there's points where you just don't have anything. Like, can't you write your wife a poem? Now, I, on the other hand, I use the GPS, but my wife says I never get lost, even with or without a map. So I'm good on that one. So I guess that's one thing I'm curious about is, we've talked about the humanity of this. We've talked about how to use the tool. We've talked about all kinds of things. One thing I'm kind of curious about, and I try to talk about it and bring people into a conversation about this, because is innovation. And I know that innovation is one of the promises of AI. And then I also understand that people think of innovation as these huge, like radical things. And I think like one of the beauties, and this is my question to you of artificial intelligence and some of the things we've been talking about, is not so much those radical changes, but it's like the ability to make these gradual improvements over time. Because I talk about innovation being important about like it's a lot of times the small things have a bigger impact than like these huge things because they immediately improve people's lives. How do you feel about innovation and the way it plays into AI?
Look, the way I look at innovation is that anything that you can do that allows you to have more time and more freedom to do things that are helping your purpose or your organization's purpose, that is innovation, right? So, for example, if you want to take a pile of paper and manually start putting in a folder, I mean, that's a very labor-intensive thing versus, like what we have done with automation and you're putting everything digitized, et cetera, et cetera. So AI has tremendous amount of those kind of capability that can make you, that will allow you. I mean, you have to measure the impact of innovation by looking, is it giving me more time? Is it allowing me to be more creative? Is it allowing me to produce more? Is it allowing me to help other people, right? So those should be the measurement criteria. So for example, that example of me creating that slide, should I be spending like 5 hours to creating a slide that's from my own content, or shall I spend 5 minutes to create the slides? Well, that 5 hours is more precious to me than the creating those slides, right? So because that's just a communication vehicle. So anything that allows you to be more allows you to have more time and more to be able to help other people and impact, that is a part and parcel of driver of innovation. Now, if you talk about in the context of enterprise, just a couple of, because enterprise is a collection of people, so innovation is not, an innovation is never a one person or individualistic thing in an organization at an organizational level or even at an individual level. So from that context, I preach the notion of that you have to explore a lot of different ideas. That's where the open and care framework comes in, and that's described in the book. Meaning you have to be open to possibilities and you have to explore a lot of different ideas that you create kind of your portfolio, and then you have, but you also have to care what's the impact of these innovation, both from a good and bad point of view, care for humanity, and you have to kind of do risk management around the portfolio. So you may have a lot of ideas, but you have to you have to kind of rack and stack that against a set of risks, and then you decide, okay, look, I have 10 ideas, 3 of them worth pursuing, but one of them is really worthwhile, and you pursue that idea to execute whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up risk here, because one of the things I noticed was how you talked about planning around risk. And is just as important to plan for failure as it is to plan for success. And I know like people don't always frame it that way. So I'm curious, if you can explain that to people so people understand it a little more, because that very much is consistent with the way I teach people to do things, because I'm like, oh, and if it's a 10 on the risk scale and only a 1 or 2 on the win side, why are you going to do that to yourselves, right? So I'm curious how you would explain
right. It. Sure. Look, the first word of care is catastrophize, right? So it's like the catastrophic scenario that can happen, and you have to think about this. What's the worst case scenario, right? So you have to say, look, if I expose this set of data in an open cloud environment, as an example, and somehow it gets leaked, what does it do for my enterprise? What does it do for my government agency? And that is something you have to think about, right? Or if I come up with a data set that is very biased, right? And is it really going to help the people who are consuming that data? For example, if I have a bunch of data that is and I'm hiring a bunch of candidates, and I'm only seeing a particular type of candidate because it's biased, I'm not doing a favor to the candidate pool, nor I'm doing a favor to my organization, right? You can take it even farther, right? Like for example, if you have a data set of a particular age group and you're trying to treat a patient that is younger than that age group, the data set only covers 50 plus people, you're not going to be very helpful with the data set making the decision. So all of these requires an intentional approach to think about worst case scenario. And it's not that you have to abandon a particular idea or possibility because there are those risks, but you have to mitigate those risks. So the risk is inherent part of how we become more resilient, but also how we become more, innovative with a purpose and an intention that has a greater impact than it would have otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. Because people just say, I'm going to eliminate risk. And I go, there's no such thing. It doesn't happen. Not changing anything is risky, right? There's just
Yes.
It's just always managing that risk. And the way that you explained it, I think should be very helpful to people. One other, you have the open framework, you have the care framework, which I thought are really good. The one I really sort of enjoyed the most was the ratchet.
Yeah, sure.
So let's can you explain the ratchet, because it's especially pointed out for businesses, and I think most of the people who are listening to this have some form of business that they're working in, and I think this is really important.
Ratchet is the first element of the open framework, which really open, is for exploring your possibility. And Ratchet stands for, reaffirm, assess, treat, consider, human-centered, evaluate, and target. And it has particular steps that starts with, you have to reaffirm what's the purpose that you're moving towards and what you're trying to do. And then it goes into assessing your knowledge base and what's the possibility. And then you have to look at the uncertainty. You have to consider the possible use cases. You have to make it very human-centered and evaluate the viability. And then you have to say, okay, based on all that, how do we target the possible? What should we be doing, right? So it's a structured way and systemic way of thinking, but it is keeping the human element at the forefront of the thinking process. Human meaning, what's the impact of humanity? What's the impact? And it's like, if I create a product, is it really going to add value? If I create a service, is it really going to add value? So it kind of walks you through that. And we came up with these acronyms so that people can easily relate, but also easily implement in their enterprises and create a common language, that's understandable regardless of your domain expertise.
Yeah. The two things that you've come back to over and over again here has been the purpose. Like, you need to know why you're doing these things, and then the humanity. And I think it brought a question to me, which was looking at a lot of the people who are, minus you, because you are definitely rooted in the human aspect of all of this stuff. It feels like a lot of the people who are most advocating for AI and these technologies, again, are trying to leech the humanity out of them. So how do we push back against that? How do we what can we do as people to take more of your approach, right? Especially in the face of these people who they have more money than we do, because I'm not the second or third richest man in the world. So, how do we make sure that the human is never lost? Because I think that's just the key.
So that's why, I end the book by saying humanity would be whatever we do in next 3, 5, 10 years collectively, right? Because it's not, what we do individually, what we do organizationally, and what we do as governing bodies of different nations is what's going to shape humanity. So the pushing back, it would be you as an individual, how you use it, what you support, what you buy. how you influence other. That's what you can do as an individual level. As an organization, because I mean, when you were talking, I'm sure you're talking about the platform vendors like the big tech, the tech giants and other folks.
Yeah.
But there is also the consumer of those who are businesses, meaning all kind of businesses. They're not in the platform business, but they're using the platforms to create product and services. They have legal, ethical, and responsibility in terms of how they use those and how they bring product and services to the consumer. So they have to do their part, because if the individual and the businesses play with a ethical mindset and following some sort of a legislation. By the way, regulation is not against innovation. Innovation is, this debate that if you regulate, we are going to become more innovative. That is not true. You can be more innovative, and you can be more purposefully innovative if you actually follow some level of ethical guidelines and regulation. And by the way, and you can compare it with other technologies. So, for example, you can think about nuclear technology. You can look at pharmaceutical technologies, right? Meaning the biotech and other kind of drug industry type of technology, which is regulated, right? Because the reason it's regulated is because it, as much as good it does, it can also do enormous amount of harm. With information technology and with the computer technology, what has happened, we have kind of grown up with a very democratic access to these technology, but it has always been a passive technology that whereby you can do a lot of harm, but it's kind of regulated. It's kind of not. It wasn't where it was. AI, on the other hand, got into the next level, and it's highly democratized in the sense that anybody and everybody can access. So I think the way we push back is that we need to create this collective voice and start defining what it really means to be human, and that's where we start the book. And how do we kind of maintain that, and which part of humanity is worthwhile to protect, and that decision is not just upon you or me.
Yeah.
It's collectively what we do as a society.
Yeah,
Fortunately or unfortunately.
Yeah, I was gonna say it cuts both ways. But it's the regulation piece like really like stuck with me, because it's like you need some rules, and like you
Yes.
can't let everybody set their own rules, because that's just a formula for chaos. And I think that's where people are concerned. So one final question for you that before we plug the book and plug you. So if I'm not mistaken here, you're telling me that AI is going to save the world, but it's not going to do it alone. It's going to need all of us to be involved.
AI is going to save the world or destroy the world, depending on what we do. It has equal opportunity to destroy us or equal opportunity to save us.
I'm glad you
but we have to
realized the
decide
joke
what
there.
part of humanity is worth saving. Right. So I'm a pragmatist. I'm a radically optimist because I'm a technologist, right? But I'm also a utterly pessimistic because I understand and have seen. I mean, I grew up, in an era where I've seen war, I've seen famine, and we're all living through a next generation of all kind of adversity. So I know what can happen, when we don't pay attention. So it will be whatever we collectively do.
I'm glad you knew exactly how to answer that. Faisal, how do people find you on the internet, and where can people find your writing and your
Sure.
talking about this?
Look, you can find me on my website, which is faisalhoque.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very, I frequently share stuff daily basis. I try to share a nugget of wisdom or knowledge that I'm acquiring along the way, and you don't need to buy anything to get those. And by the way, books are all for a charity. They all go to cancer research because I have a cancer surviving son. If you buy the book, you're going to learn. Hopefully, you'll learn something and can use it in your business or individually. But you're also going to help this cause. Aside from that, you can find the books anywhere you want. I mean, whether it's Barnes and Noble or whether it's Amazon or whether it's wherever the books are sold, you'll find it. It's in ebook form, it's in audio form, and it's in hard copy. So.
Yeah, well, great. I would tell people to check you out. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me, David. It's been an honor.
I felt a lot more knowledgeable about my ability to understand and use AI after talking to Faisal, but I'm curious what you think. So send me an email. It's my name, Dave, at davewakeman.com. Make sure you visit my website, www.davewakeman.com. You can sign up for my newsletters, and you'll make sure you do not miss any blog posts, any announcements, anything. Like today, if you're getting this thing first thing in the morning on April 1st at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, I am doing the first in a 5-part series of how to sell tickets in a economic uncertain time. This one's called Understanding the Premium and Single Ticket Buyer Mindset in a Downturn. The link is in the show notes. Make sure you sign up. It's going to be great. It's about 15 or 20 minutes of me sharing content, and then I'm going to spend 15 or 20 minutes answering questions. So make sure you check that out. Do me a favor. You've made it this far into my conversation, so make sure you rate and review the podcast, and share it with somebody who will benefit from a conversation like the one I just had with Faisal Hoque. All these things make sure I continue to get great guests, have great conversations, and the podcast grows, which is important to me. And the more it grows, the better it is for you, because then I get more and better guests, just like Faisal. As always, I want to thank you for being here, because I couldn't do it without you. And until next time, take it easy. I'll talk to you soon.